QuickBooks Pro Plus Desktop 2022 OneNote Presentation Form 99 Report. Let's get into it with Intuit's QuickBooks Pro Plus Desktop 2022. Here we are in OneNote. If you have access to OneNote, would like to follow along, icon left-hand side, topic introductions, 4120, Form 1099 report. Also take a look at the Immersive Reader tool, topic introductions, also in the text area with the same name, same number, but with transcripts. Transcripts that can be translated into multiple languages, either listened to or read in them. Same name and number as presentations as well. Topic introductions designed to give an introduction to the topic. Provide screenshots, links where applicable. Give accounting background to support the presentations. Can also be used to follow along with the presentations if you don't have access to the software at that time. Closing the icon on the left-hand side, looking at the 1099 report information. When you're thinking about setting up the 1099s, you got to first think about who's going to be needing a 1099. Typically non-incorporated individuals or companies or people that you are going to be paying, or vendors, in other words, often sole proprietorships that you pay over a certain dollar amount, that dollar amount often being quite low. So you want to possibly mark as 1099s anybody that's under a certain dollar amount. Now, to set up the 1099s, you'll typically need to be going into the vendors as you set them up, determine if they're going to be someone that will be eligible for a 1099 that you'll have to check out. Typically, those will be the sole proprietorships. Indicate that they will need a 1099. Give the social security number on the report so that you can put that on the 1099 when you create them. And then you can set up the 1099s and run the 1099 reports, helping you to meet the obligations of the 1099s for tax purposes at the end of the year. So if you go to the Report Center, Reports drop down, Report Center, and go to the Vendors and Payables and scroll down to the 1099 area, you got a 1099 Summary Report and the 1099 Detail Report. You can also go to your Vendor Center. These are going to be the lists of people that you pay, and you need to determine which of these people then are going to be people that you might have to send a 1099 to, and you could then go into them and mark them off as individuals that you need to send a 1099 to. If you go to the reports, the edit dropdown and the preferences at the bottom of the edit dropdown, and then down to the tax and 1099 information, then go to the company preferences. It's going to say, do you file 1099s? I believe it's on by default, but you can turn on that activity and that will help you to track the 1099s. The first thing here then says, if you're ready to prepare for your 1099s, include mapping accounts. You could go to this item. If you want to map your accounts to boxes on Form 1099 NEC, you could go here. If you want to map your accounts to boxes on Form 1099 Miscellaneous, you could go here. It used to be that most of the 1099s for most companies, in other words, are going to be non-employee compensation. It used to be that that box, included with many other boxes, was on this 1099 Miscellaneous form, which now they have moved to another form for that specific purpose, 1099 NEC. So most people are probably up here with the 1099 NEC. But if you have some other 1099 like rent or something like that, then you might have to go to the Miscellaneous form. And if you have to issue 1099s for multiple purposes, then you can map to these multiple forms for the types of payments that you have made. That could, of course, be a little bit more difficult. You do that not only by tagging the vendor that you need to pay the 1099 to, but also tagging the account that you're using, which hopefully then can be used to determine which box on the 1099 form and which 1099 form needs to be used as you issue them. So then if I scroll down and look at a particular vendor, go into Vendor Center, go into a particular vendor, go into the tax settings, you got the vendor tax ID, which could be the EIN number that you would need to get from the sole proprietorship, which can be a little bit hard if you're working with people that aren't used to giving that information, but they should give you that because you're required to get that information. If they don't have an EIN number because they don't have any employees, you might persuade them to get an EIN number because you could get it from the IRS website. Otherwise, you would need a social security number, which they're going to be hesitant to give you. And then you've got to check off the fact that you're going to need to 1099 them. That then will allow us to track the 1099 information in the reports. And through QuickBooks, if you try to generate the 1099s through the use of QuickBooks. Then if you run the 1099 report, go into the reports dropdown, and I believe it was in the vendors section, and to the 1099s, you have your drop downs up top, all vendors, all allowed accounts, and I'm ignoring the threshold at this point in time. This then will list out all the vendors that you had marked off as people that are going to need a 1099 that are over the dollar amount if you put the dollar amount restriction, which is really low, like $600. And so this gives you a nice list that you can then use to create your 1099s by hand if you so choose, or you could try to use QuickBooks in order to create the 1099s. If you don't have your 1099s set up, you could try to adjust these items up top to have all vendors and then all accounts, and then try to sort your vendors by basically who you're going to owe money to. So in here I have all vendors. You could sort it then to the vendors that are restricted that need a 1099 at the end. If you sort by all vendors, it might be a nice list that you can look at to kind of sort out and print out and determine which ones of them are sole proprietorships that you need to send a 1099 to. Now I've restricted it to only the 1099 vendors. So once you have all the vendors that you think should be getting a 1099, then you can restrict it. And now you're showing just those people that need the 1099. You got the information of who they are and the number down below that are the key components that are necessary to tell the IRS about them, because the IRS basically wants to know who they are and their number, and so that they and their address, right, so that they could find them. The address isn't on this report, so you still have to pick that up. This is a 1099 NEC, non-employee compensation, box 1, probably the most common 1099 that would need to be issued. If you go to the edit drop-down preferences at the bottom and we go to the yes item here, you could sort the 1099s and see if you can generate through the QuickBooks system. Is another way you could set that up. If you were to click on that and go through the process, you get this series. Let's help you prepare your file, your 1099 forms. You got the 1099 NEC on the left and the 1099 miscellaneous on the right. These are two separate kind of processes here because they're going to be two different forms. If you go into the NEC on the left, then you could select your 1099 vendors. So these will be generated on the left-hand side. We continue on. We then have our verify your 1099 information, where we have the vendor name, the ID, the company name, first name, last name, the address, phone number, the information needed for the 1099, map vendor payment account. So you could do your mapping to the box, which would typically be box 1 if you're talking about this particular 1099, and then review payments for exclusions. And then you can confirm your 1099 entries here. And if you continue, you could choose a filing method. You could print the 1099 NECs or go to 1099 e-file services, which you might have a cost for the e-file services on the right. And then so you could have a cost to these items. And if you could also buy 1099s possibly and use this information to populate the 1099s in that way and send them in that way as well. So select vendors to print form 1099 NEC. So you select these items and then we go through the printing. This would be the printing information. Note that it's printing on a blank form instead of printing an actual 1099, because you'd still have to populate the 1099 in essence into the printer. And if you line it up properly, it should print in the proper boxes on the 1099 form.